Vinudhi Wahalathanthri, and I'm here with my 18th question set from the DBMS question series. So in this video, I'm going to explain y'all how to correctly create a normalized ER diagram for a given problem and how to graphically design the ER diagram created by forward engineering and how to insert data into those tables. So we'll be using the graphical method as well as queries to insert data to these tables. So in question set 16, I created a database called ExamMarksDB, and in my previous videos, we created the tables for that database. So in this video, I'm going to show y'all how to add the data to those tables we created for that database, ExamMarksDB. So let's see how I'm going to add data to these tables. So I'll be using the graphical method as well as the query method to insert data. So let's see what are the instructions given to add data to these tables. So our first instruction given is enter the data in the table below to the class table. So we created a table called class in our ExamMarksDB database. So now we have to add these data to that class table. So our class names are 11A and 11B, and there are specific IDs for them. So now I will open my HideSQL software to insert these data. So this is my ExamMarksDB database. So over here, I have created a table called class. So let's begin to add data to it. So I'll be using the graphical method to add data to these tables. So our first class name is 11A, and I'll give the class ID as 1. And our next class name is 11B, and the class ID will become 2. So now our class table is complete. Let's move on to our next instruction. Enter the data in the table below to the student table. So it's quite a big table, so it will take us a long time if we use the graphical method to insert data. So I'll be using the query method for it. Okay, so this is our table we have to fill. So y'all can see that there's an index number, a first name, last name, gender, contact number, and class name. So over here, the thing we only have to change is the class name. So without giving the class name, we are going to give the class ID for it. Why? Because we have foreign keyed the class table to this student table. So to create this query, I'll be using a format like this. So I'm going to type this query like insert into ExamMarksDB.student, and then I'll give the values inside the bracket, and I'll give those data inside single quotations. So ExamMarksDB will become our database and student is our table. So likewise, I have inserted the values. So that's something we have to remember. So when we are inserting these values inside these brackets and single quotation, we have to give the values respectively according to those columns. So let's say that for the student index number column, I have given the student's first name. So then it will cause an error. So therefore, we have to give those data respectively according to those column names. So let's begin to type this query in our HideSQL software. Okay, so now I'll begin to type an insert query. So I'll give it as insert into, and then I'll give our database name. So this is a small tip. So if you want any suggestions, so if it's too hard to type, so it's way more easier when we give the shortcut control space, and then we can get the suggestions. So then we can press enter, and likewise we can get the suggestions. Okay, so insert into ExamMarksDB student, and then I'll give the values, and I'll give these, and I'll give the semicolon. So now let's begin to add these data. So I'll copy all of this at once, but we can't directly put this. We have to insert them inside single quotations. So every single data we have to give inside single quotations, or the system won't identify it as a specific value. So likewise, I'll insert them inside single quotation. And for our class name, our class, the name of the class, I'm going to give the class ID. So because it's 11A, the class ID will become 1. So I'll insert this inside single quotations as well. So now let's run this query and see what happens. So I'll click this play button. Okay, so let's see what happens. So I'll go to our student table. Okay, so now our query has been successfully executed and it has been successfully added to our database or to the table as a data. So now, like this method, I'm going to add the rest of our rows like this. Okay, so now I have added all our rows. So now I'm going to remove the first row that I typed, because if I execute it again, it will cause a data duplication. So to avoid it, I will remove it. So now let's execute these queries and let's see what happens. Okay, so it's executed. Let's go to our student table, data, and refresh it. So now my queries has successfully executed and the data has been successfully applied. So now this is the way we can type an insert query to insert data into tables. So let's move on to our next instruction. So our next instruction given is enter the data in the table below to the subject table. So now we have to add these data to our subject table. So our subject names are mathematics, mathematics, science, and Sinhala. So I'll go to my HiDSQL software and I will open my subject table. So I'll be using the graphical method to insert these data. So our first subject name will become mathematics. So I will type it as mathematics. And I'll give the subject ID as 1. So likewise, I'll type science as well. And I'll give the subject ID as 2. So next, I'll create Sinhala language and literature. Okay. And I'll give the ID as 3. So now our subject table is completed. Let's move on to our next instruction. So next we have to insert the data to our exam term table. So now we have to insert the term name as well as the exam date. So now, let's begin to add these data. So I will copy this date so it would be more easier. So next, I will go to our exam term table and I'll insert the row and I'll first give the term name as first term. First term and the term date. So y'all can see that once I click this term date option, the default term date has been added or the current date has been added. So y'all can see it over here. Friday, December 30th, 2020. So now we have to change it. So to change it, we can also use this increase and decrease buttons, but I'm just going to type them. So our date will become 2020 and the month will become March and the day will become 15. So I'll give it as March 15. Okay. So likewise, I have typed it. So use the same method to create the second term as well. Okay, so now our exam term table is complete. Let's move on to our next instruction. Enter the data in the table below to the table named Student Exam Mark Records. Okay, so this is a very huge table and it's really hard to do this graphically. So it's really easy when we use the query method for it. So you can see that we have to insert the data of first term marks, second term marks in mathematics, and in science also the first term and second term marks. So likewise in the Sinhala language and literature as well. So this is quite a hard one. So there's an easy way to do this using queries. So let me show you how to do it. Okay, so this is our question. So now y'all can see that it's a really big table. So now I'll show y'all the format in which we are going to type the query. Okay. So now there is a huge number of queries we have to type for just one student index number. But don't worry, because this is the easiest method. It's really hard if we go to do it using the graphical method. So now this is the way you can type for one student index number. So now this is a bit complicated. So let me show y'all the format. Okay, so now there's a specific format for this. So it's the student index number, subject ID, and term ID. Okay, so now I have taken an example. So over here, you can see that I have inserted our insert into statement, and then I have added our database name and the student exam mark record, that's our table, and then I have inserted the values like this. So over here, I have inserted the student's index number. And next, I have inserted the subject ID. So subject ID 1. So that's mathematics. So next, the term ID. So term ID 1. So that's first term. And 80 is the mark. So the marks obtained by student ID 002, subject ID 1 for mathematics, term ID 1, first term, marks are 80. So we can read it like this. Student 002 has obtained 80 marks for mathematics in the first term. So we can read it likewise. So if we move on to our next query, we can tell student ID 2 has obtained 75 marks for maths in the second term. So y'all can see that over here, I have added 2. So 2 is for second term. So over here, if I show y'all, these queries over here, student ID 2 has obtained 80 marks for maths in first term and 75 marks for maths in second term. And next, I have added 45 marks for science in the first term and 55 marks for science in the second term. So next, I have added 75 marks for Sinhala in the first term and 85 marks for Sinhala in the second term. So this is the format we can type for one student index number for this table. Okay, so let's see how I'm going to type this in our HiDSQL. Okay, so now I'm going to type the query for stu_001. So I'm going to type it as insert into, and then I'll give our database name as exam marks EB, and then the table as student exam mark records, and then I'll begin to give our values. So our first value is the student's index number. So I'll give it as SU001, and next I'll give the subject ID as mathematics. So I'll give it as 1. And next, I'll give the term ID as 1, which stands for first term. And next, I'll give the marks as 50. Okay. So likewise, I'll type for second term as well. Okay, so likewise, I have typed the 2 queries for second term as well. Okay, so before executing this query, just make sure that you have removed the primary keys which you have added for the student index number, which you have foreign keys from the student table, and the subject ID which you have foreign keyed from the subject table, or it will cause an error. So because it's really disturbing, so remove the primary keys you have added for those 2 columns. Okay, so now let's begin to execute it and see what happens. So I will use this button to execute it. Okay, so it has been executed. Let's go to data and reload it. Okay, so this is how our query has been executed and the data has been applied. So likewise, I'll show you how I'm going to type the queries for science and Sinhala as well. So these are the queries I'm going to type for SCU001. So after this, I'm going to show you how to type for all student index numbers. Okay, so these are all the codes for STU001. So this is maths, science, and Sinhala. So first term, second term, first term, second term, first term, second term. So now I will execute this. Okay, let's go to data and see how it's viewed. I will reload it. Okay, so now our data has been successfully applied. So this is how we are going to type an insert query for one student's index number. So likewise, let me show you how I'm going to add all the index numbers with these queries. Okay, so likewise, I have typed queries for all the index numbers. So it's a lot, but don't worry because it's worth it. It's way more easier than adding data graphically. So this is the easiest method. So y'all can see that I have typed queries for all the index numbers. So let's execute it and see what happens. Okay, so it has been executed. Let's go to data. Wish me luck and refresh. Success! My data has been successfully applied to all the rows and index numbers. So this is how it will be built. So I hope you understood what I explained. So this is how we are going to write an index query, an insert query to insert data when they give us a question like this. Okay, so I hope you understood what I explained. So thank you everyone for watching. I really appreciate it. So I'll be back with a new video. So until then, have a nice day and bye.